morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever time you're watching, very good morning. Today we are actually going to discuss Keynesian theory of interest, employment and money. And it is going to be a very interesting and very easy theory as well. See, people may actually tell it is difficult and some students may also feel it difficult. What I actually want to tell is, if the teacher is good, he will make difficult concepts easy. And if the teacher is bad, he or she may make easy concepts difficult. So we are going to discuss Keynesian theory of interest, employment and money today with a diagrammatic explanation. You will definitely understand, just listen for what I have to tell you, will definitely understand the complete Keynesian theory of interest, employment and money. Right. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Now, obviously, we have to understand why Keynes thought about creating this theory. And we have to understand the time in which the theory was created. The time in which the theory was created was 1936. And mind you, if you have not seen it, please do see my my Great Depression video, which will be in the playlist. So the thing is, here when you see the Great Depression basically happens in 1929 to 1939, where there is huge unemployment problem in the economy. The world, there is huge unemployment problem. The classical theory of J.B. Say's law, which says supply creates its own demand, Adam Smith's proposition, laissez-faire policy, has miserably failed to sustain the economy of the world. Now, in such a situation, when people are vast unemployed are there, Keynes writes a theory of how employment can be generated in an economy. And that is the significance of this theory. So let's actually understand, according to Keynes, how this employment can actually be generated in the economy as such. Keynes' proposition goes something like this. He believes employment is actually a function of effective demand. Now, the question arises, the first question which actually should arise in your mind when you actually listen to this is, what is effective demand? And is effective demand related to demand? And if it is related, how? If it is not related, how? So the thing is, I will tell you, first and foremost for this, we have to understand what is demand. So when we are actually speaking about the what is demand, so let's actually see what is demand. When we are actually speaking about the demand is nothing but, first of all, you must be having the desire to buy something. And after having the desire, you must be having money in your pocket. You must be having money in your pocket. That is, you must be having ability to pay. And after ability to pay, the next thing you basically must be having is ability to pay. So you basically have ability to pay, and after ability to pay, the next thing you must be having is willingness to pay. So you want to buy a mobile. For mobile, obviously you have the desire, you have the ability, you have 100 rupees to buy the mobile, and even you are willing. But the thing is, you are thinking, I will buy at 4 p.m. Next you thought, no, it is raining. Since it's raining, I will buy at 5 p.m. So this is what your demand is. This is what is your demand. So what is demand? Although you have desire, ability and willingness, you may be procrastinating. I will buy at 4 or I will buy at 5. But when you are speaking about effective demand is the thing. When you will buy, if you want to buy, you are buying at 4 p.m., you will definitely buy at 4 p.m. This is effective demand. In effective demand, the buying definitely happens. In demand, buying most probably will happen. In demand, buying most probably will happen. In effective demand, buying will definitely happen. That is the difference between demand and effective demand. So that is something like which we have to understand. That is what we basically have to understand. Now, Keynes says, if employment is dependent upon effective demand. See, if people will definitely buy, I will definitely produce. If a producer definitely produces, he requires factors of production. If he requires factors of production, that is land, labor, capital, organization, obviously employment is generated. Next, when effective demand will result in output. If I know 100% people are going to buy, then 100% I will supply. So effective demand determines output, and employment is dependent on effective demand. Effective demand will definitely produce output. And output will definitely produce income. If you are obviously producing output, see, if you are actually producing output, so this is what you basically call as output, right? If you are actually producing output, you require the 4 factors of production. You require land, you require labor, you require land, you require capital, you require organization. And if you are requiring land, obviously you have to pay rent for it. For land, you have to pay rent. For labor, obviously, you have to pay wages. For capital, you have to pay interest. And for organizer, gets profit. Organizer gets profit. So obviously, if output is actually being produced, for that, income must definitely be given. And income will definitely result in employment. Income will definitely result in employment, because if income is being given, obviously people would like to work. So Keynes actually assumes all the four things are equal. That is employment, effective demand, output, income. Right. So thing is, all these four things are equal, and effective demand, output, income, employment, all are equal. So keeping all the things are interrelated and equal, we can actually say employment is a function of income. So employment is dependent upon income. If people have to be employed, if the people are willing to come and work, then it depends upon the salary they get. So we can actually say employment is actually a function of income. That is the thing which we basically have to understand as such. Employment is basically a function of income. This is what we have to understand. Now, this is the first proposition of Keynes. So what is the first proposition of Keynes? Employment is actually dependent upon effective demand. Effective demand will result in output. Output will result in income. Income will result in employment. So we can say employment is actually a function of income. Now, when we are actually speaking about the effective demand, now let's actually try to understand it even in a detail. So when we are actually speaking about effective demand is determined by aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So aggregate demand. So what is aggregate demand? Aggregate demand is nothing but it is the total demand of all the people in the country or the economy. Aggregate supply is all the goods which are actually produced in the economy. Alright. So effective demand means there must be people who are willing to buy the goods. So it is aggregate demand. So people must be there who are ready to buy and who will definitely buy, and obviously goods must also be there which has to be bought. So effective demand is actually determined on the basis of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And when you are actually speaking about aggregate demand depends upon consumption and investment. It depends on two factors. One is consumption, the other is investment. Consumption is actually dependent on income. Or we can say consumption is actually dependent on psychological law of consumption. What does psychological law of consumption says? Psychological law of consumption was also given by Keynes. Psychological law of consumption states that if income keeps on increasing, even consumption will also increase, but not at the same rate. If income keeps on increasing, even consumption will also increase, but not at the same rate, at a lesser rate. So for instance, if your income increases by say 100 rupees, even your consumption will increase, but not by 100 rupees. It will increase by 70 rupees because you would like to save 30 rupees. So here consumption, consumption depends upon income. When income increases, the consumption also increases, but at a lesser rate because a sort of a little bit money is actually saved. Now, this psychological law of consumption actually depends upon the taste, preference, attitude of the people. And in the short run, the attitude and the taste and the preferences of the people remains constant. It will not change. So thing is, since it's definitely not going to change. The attitude of the people or the whatever, the taste and the preference of the people is not going to change in the short run. Today you like jamun, it's not that tomorrow you start hating jamun. Today you like bisi belabat, it's not tomorrow you are going to hate bisi belabat. Today you like burger, tomorrow it's not that you are going to hate burger. So obviously this is something, psychological law of consumption is almost taken to be constant in the short run. So aggregate demand depends upon consumption, and consumption is constant in the short run. Next, aggregate demand also depends upon investment. So thing is, investment, when we are actually speaking about the investment depends upon marginal efficiency of capital and rate of interest. So let's actually speak about marginal efficiency of capital. So marginal efficiency of capital is nothing but the productivity of capital. If I am going to invest some money on a machine, how much the machine is going to yield me? If I am going to buy a tailoring machine, how much money I can make? That is what is called as marginal efficiency of capital. And marginal efficiency of capital depends upon two things. One is the supply price and the other is the prospective yield. See, if I want to buy a new capital, if I want to buy a new machine, I will think about two things. One is at what price is it available, And the other thing I will think is how much profit I can make from it. What is the yield from it? So the price of any tailoring machine is, or any machine or any capital is not going to change drastically in short run. Today a laptop is 20,000. For the same caliber laptop, tomorrow it will not become 90,000. So the laptop which I am going to buy, its supply price will remain constant in the short run. The capital's supply price will be constant in the short run, and even the prospective yield actually depends upon the psychological factors of the businessman. And even the businessman also understands that in 2 days or 3 days or whatever, in a month or whatever, in short run, the prospective yield is not going to drastically change in normal circumstances. Obviously, in normal circumstances, see, if my laptop is actually delivering me frames per second of 100 units, it's not that in some 10 days it's going to drastically reduce to 1, or it's going to drastically reduce to 10. And if I have a truck for which I'm actually using for transportation of goods and services, and I know that its mileage is 30 miles per liter, in 10 days it's not going to increase to 45, or it's not going to drastically fall down to 1. So obviously the prospective yield of any capital also remains constant in the short run. So here, this is the thing which we have to understand. So marginal efficiency of capital depends upon two things, that is the supply price and prospective yield, and both remains constant in the short run. And consumption depends upon income, which in turn consumption actually depends upon the psychological law of consumption, which is determined by the psychological law of consumption. So what is the psychological law of consumption states? Psychological law of consumption states, as consumption is a function of income, and as income increases, the consumption will also increase. Obviously, if your income increases by 100 rupees, even your consumption will also increase by say 70 rupees. But it will increase at a lesser rate as compared to increase in your income. If your income is increasing by 100 rupees, your consumption will not increase by 100 rupees, it will increase by 70 rupees, because 30 rupees you want to save for an emergency purpose. So that is something like which we basically have to understand. So here consumption also remains constant, and investment depends upon marginal efficiency of capital. Marginal efficiency of capital depends upon the supply price and prospective yield. Prospective yield remains constant, supply price also remains constant, so marginal efficiency will remain constant. Next is, this investment depends upon the rate of interest. So let's actually say rate of interest. When we are thinking about the rate of interest depends upon two factors, that is demand of money and supply of money. And here Keynes assumes the supply of money to be constant in the short run. Keynes actually assumes that the supply of money is going to be constant in the short run. So we cannot any speak regarding that. Supply of money is constant, finished. Next is demand of money. When we are actually speaking about the demand of money actually depends upon the three factors. What are the three factors? One is transactionary motive. The other is precautionary motive. The third thing is speculative motive. Keynes himself tells people would like to hold money because of three reasons. One is obviously they want to buy and sell goods and services. You want sugar, you want a newspaper, you want clothes, you want to rent a house. So for transaction, you will keep some money. You think some emergency may happen. You may fall ill, your parents may fall ill, or some other emergency will happen. Businessmen may think that some unexpected losses may happen. Household people may think some unexpected untoward event may happen, and that is why they would like to keep some money for emergency. And speculative money, people would like to invest in real estate. People want to invest in gold. People want to invest in shares and securities so as to make profit. So these two, this transaction and precautionary motive actually dependent upon your income. If your income is more, obviously you will eat, you will stay in a big mansion, you will drive a luxury car, and you would like to have more money for transaction. If your income is less, obviously you are a poor person, then you have to eat a very meager food, and for that obviously the expenses will also be less. And thing is, for emergency, obviously a big businessman like Ambani, Adani, Mark Zuckerberg, these people will obviously keep millions of dollars for safety, for unforeseen disasters. But a poor man will obviously keep 10 rupees or 20 rupees or $1 or $2, whatever it is. Now, the thing is speculation. Obviously, speculation is actually dependent upon interest rate. See, speculative motives actually depend upon interest rate. Alright. So, if the yield from if the expected yield from the share is more, obviously you would like to buy more shares. So what is happening? You are supplying more money in the market to buy the shares. So thing is, the share, that is the prospective yield of a share, that is the interest rate which can be earned by the share. So the money which is actually invested in assets is actually dependent upon the returns, that is the interest which the assets. And when speculative motive, Keynes actually gives huge emphasis on not the normal assets, but he gives more emphasis on the shares and debentures part of it. So what Keynes thinks is, if the interest rate is more, the supply of money will be more, and hence the demand of money will be less. See, if what you actually call as, if the interest rate is more, obviously the yield for the asset is more, or the yield for the share is more. Whenever the yield for the share is more, then what is basically going to happen? The price of the share will be less, because since the price of the share is less, that is why the yield will be more. See, if a new company comes, no one is demanding the share of the new company. So since demand is less for the new company's share, the price of the share will be less. However, the interest rate on the share will be more, because they want to attract the customers. For example, you just take the example of bank which is actually offering 6%, Kotak Mahindra Bank is actually offering 6% interest, because they obviously want to attract customers. But State Bank of India offers hardly 3.5% interest, because its brand value is already in demand. Similarly, a share issued by a big company, the share will be in demand. So the interest rate of a share will be less. And since the interest rate is less, but nonetheless the price of the share will be more. And for a share which is issued by a new company, no one will be demanding the new company's share. So its price will be less, but nonetheless its interest rate will be more. So here the price of a share is actually dependent upon interest. And it is the interest, the more the yield or the less the yield of the share will determine how much money is actually supplied. If the yield of the share is more, obviously people want to buy more shares, so they will be having less money with them, and they will spend more money in the market. And if the interest rate is less, if the yield is less, obviously they would not want to spend more money. They would want to keep less money with them, because anyway they know that they would not want to spend more money. So they will have more money with them and they will spend less money, because they don't want to buy the shares, because anyway the returns are less. So this is the thing which you have to understand, the speculative motive, the money which is actually kept under speculative motive. Here, how much money is kept under speculative motive, interest rate plays a very important role. If interest rate is more, obviously I will keep less money with me and buy more shares. If interest rate is less, obviously I will keep more money with me and buy less shares. So that is something which you basically have to understand. Next is employment. See, so this is the thing. So here what we actually proved. We actually proved employment is depend upon income, because people are not going to work unless and of course they are getting income. Okay. Now effective demand. Effective demand is actually determined by two factors, that is aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So we know that aggregate demand determines on two factors, that is consumption and investment. Consumption remains constant in the short run, and investment also remains constant in the short run, because consumption depends upon psychological law of consumption, and people's taste and preferences is not going to drastically change. So consumption will remain constant in short run. Investment depends upon marginal efficiency of capital and rate of interest, and marginal efficiency of capital depends upon the supply price. Supply price remains constant in short run. It also depends upon the prospective yield, how much I am expecting to make profit, and even that will be constant in the short run. So marginal efficiency of capital in itself will be constant in the short run. And next is we have something called as the rate of interest. When we are actually speaking about the rate of interest, so what is rate of interest? Rate of interest actually depends upon two things, that is demand of money and supply of money. Supply of money, Keynes has assumed it to be constant. Next is demand of money. Demand of money is because of three reasons, that is transaction motive, precautionary motive, and speculative motive. See, transaction and precautionary motive, that is L1, is a function of income, and income will remain almost constant in the short run. This month you are getting 10,000, next month it's unlikely, very very unlikely that from 10,000 you will go to 1 lakh. It may happen, but thing is, it is very, very unlikely. Normally speaking, your income will be constant in the short run. And even the prospective yield, in a normal circumstances, the prospective yield of the share will also be constant in the short run. If a company is doing good, it's not that in 1 month itself it will go down the drain. It may go down the drain. I'm not saying it cannot. But the thing is, the chances are, generally speaking, even the interest rate remains constant in the short run. So what we actually can understand is rate of interest, which is determined by supply of money and demand for money. Supply of money, anyway, Keynes himself assumes to be constant. Demand of money, which actually determined by these three factors, and these three factors which are determined by income and interest. Since income and interest are constant, interest means the interest. When I'm speaking about interest is actually the returns of shares and income of the people generally remains constant in short run, and that is why the demand of money remains constant. And since demand of money remains constant, supply of money remains constant, because of which the rate of interest will also remain constant in the short run. Right. So what we basically proved that all the factors, that is effective demand, aggregate demand, marginal efficiency of capital, rate of interest, all the factors which play an important role in a determination of employment remains constant in the short run. This is what we actually proved. Now, Keynesian theory actually says employment and income is determined when savings is equal to investment. See, for consumers, if they have income, obviously they will consume. They will buy some clothes and they will save. Producers, they will obviously buy some clothes, food, shelter, and they will invest. From equation 1, we have S equals Y minus C. From equation 2, we have I equals Y minus C. From equation 3 and 4, we have savings is equal to investment. So, the thing is, what actually Keynes is saying? Keynes is saying employment and income is determined when savings is equal to investment. So, when savings is equal to being there. Right. So here, when the interest rate is that much, the quantity of money is that much. And here, what we basically have to understand is, right, the other thing which we have to understand is, when interest rate is less, the investment will definitely be more. So when the interest rate is OR1, the interest rate is say MR1, the investment which is happening is basically OI2. Obviously, people would like to make more investment when the interest rate is less. Right. So interest rate is less, people are making more investment. If more investment people are making, then the employment which is generated will also be more. That is E2. And I2E2 is a remarkable case in which your savings is equal to your investment. I2E2 is a situation where your saving is equal to investment, which is generating the employment as well as the income at OI2 level. So OI2 level, obviously your income is generated. So this is one situation in the economy. Now suppose let's actually understand what happens if the interest rate increases from MR1 to MR2. If the interest rate actually increases from say MR1 to MR2, it is increasing, right? So thing is here, when we are actually speaking, let's actually erase everything. So thing is here, when the interest rate is actually increasing from MR1 to MR2, then what is happening? If interest rate is more, the investment which will be made in the economy, that will be less. Right. So it is basically less. It is decreased from OI2 to OI1. And when the investment made is less, even the employment will actually fall from E2 to E1. And when this employment actually falls, then what will happen? The income will also fall from OI2 to OI1. So income will fall from OI2 to OI1. And so this is a new equilibrium which is actually established in the economy. That is what we basically have to understand. Right. So here, so this is how all the things are interrelated. So here, what we basically understand here is this. What we understand is employment is a function of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Aggregate demand is nothing but consumption plus investment. Aggregate supply is nothing but consumption plus savings. So here aggregate supply and aggregate demand. So if MPC, if marginal propensity to consume is actually stable in the short run, employment can be increased by increasing aggregate investment. See, obviously the consumption is constant. We have already proved that the consumption is constant. Now, if the consumption is constant, then how can you increase the investment? How can you increase the investment? We have already seen here what we actually saw is when investment increases or when you reduce the interest rate, the investment increases. When the investment increases, obviously we see that the employment increases. When investment increases, we already seen the employment increases. And here what we have seen the investment depends upon marginal efficiency of capital and interest. Marginal efficiency of capital remains constant. Rate of interest remains constant. This we have already proved. So thing is, the investment which is made by the private people will be constant. In the normal circumstances, the investment which is made by the private people is constant. Then if you want to increase the employment, see, Keynes' general theory of interest, employment and money was given in the context of Great Depression, where in normal circumstances, if left to itself, the economy will not recover because all the factors which are determining the employment is constant. If it is in a state of despair, it will be in the state of despair unless and of course some external action is taken place. So what Keynes is telling is investment is constant, marginal efficiency of capital is constant, rate of interest is constant. But still, if you want to increase employment, you have to increase investment. And you know that by the normal sources, that is by private investment. Private investment has already become constant. It is not going to change in the short run. So, if at all you have to increase your employment, you have to increase the government investment. And when you increase the government investment, then what will happen? Then employment will definitely increase, as we have already seen in this diagram. So, thing is how the thing basically increases. See, suppose here, let's actually see. Again, I will tell you the same example. So let's actually see the example, right? So here we will actually see the example. See, government can arrange funds. Private people cannot easily arrange funds, but the government can always arrange funds from World Bank, from other countries, from somehow. The government, if it is in a running condition, if it is not a failed state, government by and large can raise funds. So thing is, the private, so here the everything is constant, employment has become low. So how to increase employment? Keynes is telling that the investment must be increased. Obviously Keynes knows that investment has already remained constant, that is the private investment is constant. So in order to increase the employment, government must increase the investment. So how can government make investment, and how does this investment will actually generate in employment? Now see, the thing is, suppose the government wants to build a hospital. Government decided that it's going to build a hospital. If it want to build hospital, obviously it has to employ workers. So a government, just by thinking of building a hospital, it has provided employment for people. And if you want to build hospital, you want cement. So it will create effective demand. It will basically create effective demand in cement industry. It will obviously create effective demand in cement industry. And you also want textiles. If you want textiles, obviously when it's creating effective demand in textile industry, you require steel. So it is creating effective demand in steel industry. When you are creating effective demand, obviously these people are giving work for the workers. And when these people are actually giving work for the workers, these workers also want food, clothing and shelter. And when these people want food, clothing and shelter, again they will make effective demand in these industries. So when they make effective demand, obviously these industries will also kickstart. So what the government is doing of investment, this investment will actually start a multiplier effect. This investment will actually start a multiplier effect, and it will start generating income, generating employment, and employment will further generate income, income will further generate output, output will further generate employment, employment will further generate income. So it will become a positive multiplier effect. So it will obviously become a positive multiplier effect, and that is how the Keynes actually advocates. That is how actually Keynes advocates how we can actually come out of the Great Depression. So in order to come out of the Great Depression, Keynes knows that all the factors which determine employment in the normal circumstances under short run will remain constant. So provided all the things are constant, how on earth are you going to increase the employment when employment is at low level? It will tend to be at low level because all the factors which are determining the employment will remain constant in the short run, as Keynes has proved in his theory. So if at all you want to increase the employment or the employment as well as the income, the income from Y1 to YF as well as the employment, then the only way to increase the employment in the economy is by making the investment, and this investment must actually come from the government. This is actually shown in this diagram. So in this diagram we have, in this horizontal axis we have employment and income, in the vertical axis we have consumption, investment and savings. And this C actually represents the normal consumption, right? C actually represents the normal consumption. And so when you make investment of I, obviously that is C plus I will generate this level of employment. This level of employment. So from this level of employment, if you want to increase the employment even further, then you have to make even more investment. So this additional investment is actually made by the government, which Keynes is actually advocating of how to overcome the Great Depression. So here this YF is actually the income when the full employment is there. Normally, as far as Keynes is concerned, according to Keynes, the full employment can exist, but it is a very, very, very rare phenomena. Full employment is a very rare phenomena. And why, according to Keynes, full employment is a rare phenomena is because, according to Keynes, as the income increases, even consumption will also increase, but not at the rate at which the income is increasing, because a part of income is saved. So when your part of income is saved and only a part of your income is consumed, so your income is not generating more income for the other people. If you have 100 rupees and if you are buying a biryani for 100 rupees, so your 100 rupees is generating a income of 100 rupees for the biryani fellow. But actually it is not going to happen. If your income increases by 100 rupees, you will save 30 rupees and you will spend 70 rupees on biryani. So obviously here the full employment potential in the economy is rarely achieved according to Keynes, because the people are not going to spend all the increase of their income on goods and services. They will save a part of it, and because of which underemployment equilibrium is a normal in the economy. Underemployment equilibrium is normal in the economy, and full employment equilibrium is a very, very, very rare condition. However, Keynes told that increasing investment does definitely result in increasing the employment. This Keynes actually advocates the government to take this action, and he wants the government to take this action because he knows the government can arrange funds. And so this is how Keynes actually advocated of coming out of Great Depression. That is, government intervention helps the economy to come out of depression. Because in a depression, as Keynes has pointed out in his wonderfully presented theory, that all the factors of employment, if left unintervened, will remain constant. And the only way to increase employment is actually to increase investment. That is increasing aggregate demand, and only way of increasing aggregate demand is by increasing the investment. And the only way to increase investment cannot come from the private sector, because that will remain constant. So thing is, the only way of making the investment come about is from the government. So Keynes advocates government making investment at the point of depression will help generating more employment, and through multiplier effect it will also create effective demand. Effective demand will also result effective demand. So here what we basically have, effective demand here. Effective demand will result in output. Output will result in income. Income will result in employment. So employment is actually a function of income. So this is what the Keynes actually tells. And so how this thing I explained with help of hospital examples, just go through it. So this is the Keynesian theory of employment, income and money, right? So Keynesian theory of interest, employment and money. So here what is basically happening, he first tries to understand on what employment is dependent on. Employment is actually dependent on effective demand. Then he thinks effective demand can do what? Effective demand will result in output. Output will result in income. Income will result in employment. So he understands employment is actually a function of income. People will work only when they are hoping to get money. Next, effective demand is actually dependent on aggregate demand and aggregate supply, and he proves aggregate demand and aggregate supply are constant in short run. Then aggregate demand is actually dependent on consumption and investment. Consumption and investment, he proves both the thing to be constant in short run. And thing is, marginal efficiency of capital. Investment is dependent upon marginal efficiency of capital and rate of interest. He proves marginal efficiency of capital and rate of interest to be constant in short run. Consumption depends upon psychological law of consumption, because of which it remains constant in short run. and rate of interest also remains constant in short run, he proves. So by proving all the factors which actually determine the employment to be constant, what Keynes basically understands is this. Keynes tries to figure out that if there is employment is low in the economy, if another external agency is not intervening, the employment will remain low in the economy, because all the factors which determine the employment in the economy, if left for themselves, will remain constant. So how does Keynes think employment can be increased? Keynes thinks employment can be increased by increasing the aggregate investment. So for overcoming depression in the economy, what measure does the Keynes take? Keynes wants the government to increase the investment in the economy, because of which the employment can be increased. Right. And here in this diagram, Keynes actually speaks about the interrelationship between the interest rate, what do you call L2? L2 is the function of interest, marginal efficiency of capital, investment and saving, and quantity of money, whatever. The entire thing relevance, that is what actually Keynes tells us. So this is a Keynesian theory of interest, employment and money. Hopefully you people actually understood, right? And if you have any doubts, obviously you can, right? Thank you. If you like, if you dislike, share, or obviously if you feel it's worthy of sharing, please do share. Comment if you have any doubt, do ask doubt, I'll clarify the doubts. And the thing is, have a great day, people. And knowledge is power. Obviously, keep on updating your knowledge. And rest assured, have a great day, wonderful people. Bye.